If you're thinking about specializing in test prep, the first question most people ask is SAT or ACT. They seem similar on the surface. Both are college admissions tests, both cover math and reading, but they are actually very different tests. And understanding that difference is the whole ballgame when it comes to tutoring them well. I'm Daisy Luce. I help others build a flexible, profitable online tutoring business like me by specializing in a high demand tutoring niche. Welcome to the tutor life. So let me start by clearing something up because I think a lot of people, including tutors who are new to test prep, treat the SAT and ACT as basically interchangeable. Like they're just two versions of the same thing, and they are not at all. They have very different philosophies, different structures, and they reward completely different kinds of thinking in students. Once you understand that, everything else about choosing a specialty starts to make a lot more sense. Here's the single most important thing I want you to take away from this video. The SAT is a logic test. The ACT is closer to a traditional academic achievement test. That one distinction explains almost everything else I'm going to talk about today. So keep that in mind. All right, let's start with the math difference because this is where the two tests diverge the most dramatically, I would say. And honestly, this is where tutors really need to understand what they're working with before they even choose a specialty. The SAT math section goes deep into a pretty narrow range of topics. We're really talking Algebra 1 and geometry. That's essentially it. But here's the thing. The problems are not the kind of problems students have seen in math class typically. They're designed to test reasoning and pattern recognition, and a student can know the underlying math perfectly well and still struggle because the problem is presented in this unfamiliar lateral thinking kind of way, and it doesn't look like anything from their textbook. And actually, as a tutor, this can be really good news because once you learn how the SAT constructs its problems, you can teach students to recognize those patterns. And the SAT is highly tutorable with fast goal score increases precisely because it's so systematic. There's a logic to it, and you can absolutely teach that logic. It's one of my favorite things to tutor. I love tutoring the SAT because the gains happen so rapidly. And once a student learns how to approach the test and not approach it like they've seen in math class before, it it's a game changer. It's a lot of fun. Okay, let's talk about the ACT though. The ACT math section is a completely different animal. It covers everything from pre-algebra all the way through pre-calculus. It doesn't go as deep on any one topic, but it casts a very, very wide net. The upside for students, though, is that the problems feel much more familiar. They look like the kind of math problems students have actually seen in a classroom. There's a lot less of that, wait, what is this even asking me moment that SAT students run into consistently. The trade-off though is pacing, more topics, more questions, less time per problem, and it goes all the way to pre-cal, which a lot of students have not had yet by the time they have to take the one of these college tests. So keep that in mind. A student who knows their math really well, but just works slowly can struggle on the ACT even when they know the content cold because speed does matter a lot. And even though the ACT is in the process of making adjustments right now to their timing, the number of problems they're giving, it is still a test for speed. You still have to move quickly if you're going to finish all the problems. So, to put it simply, the SAT math section goes deep on a little. The ACT goes wide on a lot. And the way problems are presented are completely different. Let me run through a few of the practical differences quickly, um, just in general about the test. Let's talk about structure. The SAT has two sections, a reading writing section and math. And both of those sections have two modules each. So it comes out to be four total. And then the ACT has three sections, English, math, and reading with an optional fourth, science. It's more to manage, more transitions for students, uh, but that's kind of the breakdown there. As far as pacing, I already referenced this a little bit. The SAT gives you more time per question. It rewards careful, methodical thinkers and logic thinkers. The ACT moves faster overall, and it rewards students who can work quickly and confidently and keep it moving. As far as scoring goes, the SAT scores range from 400 to 1600, with the two sections scored individually with 200 to 800 points. And then the ACT scores range from 1 to 36 on all three of their sections, and then those are all averaged together to get the composite score. Both tests allow super scoring for the most part. Sometimes that is college dependent if they will accept the super score, but the super score means you don't have to perform on every section your very best in one sitting. They will take your top score from math or from reading, or in the ACT from the English section, over a span of time and average all those together for a super score and send that to college for you. Both tests do allow a calculator for the entire math section, and if you are taking the computer version of either test, you are allowed Desmos also, which is the computer calculator that has become all the rave, is super powerful, and is a game changer in the tutoring world for how you tutor these tests now. So the SAT is only given on the computer, so you always have access to Desmos, but the ACT, as of right now, things are changing constantly. As of right now, they have a paper version or a computer version you can sign up for. If you sign up for the computer version, though, you get access to Desmos. If you do the paper, you don't have access to it. So I don't know how that's going to work out in moving into the future, how they're going to do that, because that does seem like a little uneven balance there, but just keep that in mind. Okay. So one question I get a lot is from parents, which test should my student take? And honestly, there's no universal answer, but there are some patterns I've seen that are worth knowing. And these are things I kind of probe a little bit when I'm trying to help a student figure out which test is the best for them. Students who are strong logic reasoners, who are good at puzzles, who think in patterns, who can think outside the box, often do really well in the SAT. Even if they're not the strongest math student in a traditional sense, they can still learn ways to solve the problem that don't require a lot of math work. Where, like maybe Desmos solves a lot of these really complicated problems in really easy ways if students know how to manipulate it. Students who are fast workers, who've covered a wide range of math topics at school and who prefer familiarity over novelty, tend to do well in the ACT. If they are very structured, um, straightforward student, I might gravitate more towards the ACT, lead them that way. Strong readers can do well on both tests, but the SAT's reading and writing section specifically rewards close analytical reading. That's very precise, where the ACT is a little bit more broad reading comprehension and reminds me a lot of all reading tests that students have been taking along the way in all their different grades, where you read a passage and you have to answer questions, specific questions, but also questions about tone and things like that. Students who tend to freeze when a problem looks unfamiliar, they're going to want to go to the ACT, not SAT. Honestly, though, in practice, a lot of students score similarly on both tests. The best way, the gold standard to find out which test is better for them is to have them sit for both tests, whether formally sign up, go in cold, and take each test, or to do it informally, where you just give them a test to take on their own time with a timer and see how that goes. That's hard for students to carve out that amount of time, though. I do know there are plenty of tutors who do have students sit for both before they decide. I tend to try to figure out the things we just went through together, which way a student leans. And I also just ask the student, which test do they like better? They're usually familiar with each, or maybe I could show them a little bit of each test and just try to get a feel for which one they like better, because many times students will work harder if they're working on something they like more, right? So, not always a clean cut, easy answer, but um, not always so important that one test is just going to be way, way higher than the other test. A lot of times they do kind of balance each other out. So, which should you specialize in to tutor? Have you thought about it? Have you thought about maybe tutoring one of these test prep topics? I would say either one can be a great specialty. I do tutor both, but let me give you a few things to actually think about. First, which test do you know more deeply right now? Just start there. You're going to be a better tutor faster if you build on something you already know rather than starting from scratch, although starting from scratch is not a bad idea either. Second, the SAT's logic-based structure does make it very systematic to teach once you understand it. That's actually part of why I love tutoring it, not only to students, but I also teach other tutors how to tutor the SAT. It is a really fast test you can get up and running and tutoring for very, very quickly. Once you see how it works, you can teach the patterns, and students also make progress quickly. The ACT's wide base of knowledge means more material to cover, which is more work up front, but for you as a tutor and then for your students, students often feel more comfortable with it from day one, which can make those early sessions feel easier. There's not such a huge hill you have to climb right out of the gate in order to get going on that test. It's also worth knowing when you're trying to decide what to tutor that geography does matter. And even if you're an online tutor, it's important to recognize that some regions of the country heavily favor one test over the other. I happen to be in a state where my state leans SAT, but I'm very close to another state line, and that state goes ACT. And even though I am an online tutor and have students from all over the country that I tutor, a lot of my referrals get going in a certain direction, and I'll end up getting a pocket of students from certain areas. So it just helps to know which test is most common in the areas that you might end up getting a lot of those referrals in. And here's the thing, you don't have to choose forever. Obviously, a lot of tutors just start with one test, get really good at it, and then add the other later once they're confident. And that's a great plan too. That's a totally reasonable path. The most important thing is that you understand the test deeply enough to teach the reasoning behind it, as well as the content. You have a really good plan laid out ahead of you of what you're going to present each time. And that is what separates a great test prep tutor from someone who just kind of works through a few practice problems. That's something again that I have totally organized for my students in a way that I've present the SAT. I have worked on for years and years to master this very specific order. It's very intentional the way I lay it out. And I teach that to other tutors as well. And I give them access to everything that I have, my full program also. So if you're maybe on the line thinking about tutoring SAT, I have some great resources for you that you could check out. Um, Whichever test you decide to focus on, the investment is totally worth it. Test prep is one of the most in demand, well paid tutoring niches out there. Once you know the test inside and out, you become the person families will seek out. And that's a really good place to be. If you found this helpful, I'd love it if you'd subscribe. I put out new videos every week about building a tutoring business that actually works for your life. And if you're thinking about SAT tutoring specifically, but not sure what the math might entail, I do have a free SAT math formula sheet below that will show you every single math concept needed for the SAT. So hope that helps, and happy tutoring.